And I've had Amy Scher on this program before. She's a wonderful, amazing energy practitioner, and she has written a book called This Is How I Save My Life. It's a brand new book, just published, and in it she chronicles her journey through her own self-healing and how she's come out on the other side. Amy has suffered from Lyme disease, and her adventures took her through embryonic stem cell therapy in India. She's had some India adventures, and she has really come out the other side truly healthier and well, excuse me, in every aspect of her being, and she continues this through with her clients that she sees here in Monterey and also in Los Angeles and really all over, because she can work distance. So let's get Amy to tell you her story. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Again with us. Tell us a little bit about, God, this is amazing that you were able to get your whole story out in a book, because you chronicled your journey as it was happening.
I did.
You wrote journals and blogged and all about this journey. So let's go back to the beginning.
Sure.
And tell us a little bit about how you really came to understand that you had Lyme disease. What led up to that, and what did you go through before you actually got a diagnosis?
Yes, I was going to say it took a while before I figured it out,
Yeah,
which is very, very typical. Lyme disease can mimic lots of other diseases, multiple sclerosis and lupus and arthritis and fibromyalgia and all those that kind of seem to fall into the same catch-all. So early in my 20s, I started having some migraine headaches and went to the doctor, who told me it was hormonal problems, which probably I was having hormonal problems. What early 20-year-old, you know?
Who isn't?
Yeah, who isn't? So anyway, you know, I took some migraine medication, which now, it's so funny, now that I'm on the other side of healing, I would never do almost any of the things I did, you know, in the beginning. But live and learn, I was in my early 20s and wanted to get back to life.
Sure.
I took migraine medication. The migraines sort of went away, and then I sort of developed this chronic nausea. And that was kind of the only symptom I had for a while. I had been traveling in Thailand, so I thought maybe I picked up a parasite there, but it kind of went on, and I had all the tests done.
Kind of a low-level nausea, no vomiting or anything, but just always, so you have a low appetite?
Yeah, and I just felt kind of queasy all the time.
Okay.
So kind of like I was always coming down with something. So I had all the GI tests done to see if my mobilization was okay and if I was digesting food, and everything always came back okay. I ate toast with dye on it where they make sure it's going to go through. Yeah. So that eventually sort of went away, and then I started having a problem with getting shingles, which usually only affects people with low immune systems or maybe a little bit older people. And so anyway, all these things then started going wrong one at a time, and every time I would go to the doctor and they wouldn't really connect it, like this is all one problem.
Yeah.
And so I was eventually kind of deteriorated to the point where I was eventually bedbound. And it took a little while to get to that point.
But you were still in your 20s?
I was still in my 20s. I was about 25. And I just slowly lost the use of my legs and arms, and had a lot of problems like opening water bottles, doing kind of those motor skill kind of things, and had a hard time eventually like picking up my leg to go from the gas pedal to the brake in the car. Just things started just really going downhill.
Yeah.
So I continued to go to doctors who continued not to know what I had, and this went on for years. And so I was on disability. I had been working as a marketing director for Harley Davidson, and I kind of thought maybe I was working too many hours. I was probably having too much fun doing all those things people in their 20s do.
Yeah.
And eventually I ended up being treated for toxicity. I went to a specialist in Santa Barbara and thought, well, this is one of the only things I haven't looked into. Maybe I have some kind of severe toxicity. And lo and behold, in the tests, he found all kinds of toxicity, which I'm sure would show up in many of us. I don't think that event wasn't the cause of my problems, but he did find that along the way. And I actually was sent for something called hyperbaric oxygen treatment, which is being treated with pure oxygen that helps detox your system. And now they have all kinds of low-level chambers where you can do it in your house and do it at clinics. But I went for like a big deal oxygen treatment, and I went every day. And the director at the clinic there said, you know, you really seem like you could have Lyme disease. You have a lot of the same symptoms. And little did I know at the time, hyperbaric oxygen was really beneficial for treating Lyme disease. So I said, no, 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 I've been tested for that so many times. And he flipped through my lab work, and I had a binder about this big. And he flipped through it, and he said, oh, you didn't get tested at the right labs. And I said, what do you mean? I had been to the Mayo Clinic. I mean, I had been to the biggest, I had been to the best hospital in Chicago. I mean, I traveled all over the United States. So it turns out that testing for Lyme disease isn't all that accurate.
Of course.
So I learned.
Yeah.
So in any case, I ended up getting tested with a lab that specializes in tick-borne illnesses, and Lyme disease is when you get from a tick and the bacteria is transferred into your body. And it came back borderline positive. Even with the best labs, it doesn't always come back black and white.
Yeah.
So I was sent to a Lyme specialist, and there came my diagnosis 7 years after my first symptoms.
Wow.
So anyway, I didn't have a lot of the typical things that people say when you have Lyme disease. A lot of doctors, say that you have to have a bullseye rash, which means, around where you got bitten, there's a rash that's like a big red circle. I didn't have anything like that. I didn't have any rashes. I didn't have any fever. I didn't have a lot of the typical Lyme disease, symptoms. And so I have learned, I've learned since then, nobody has the typical. You're very lucky if you have a typical, a typical set of symptoms.
Textbook case, huh?
Yeah. And if you find that you do have symptoms and you were bitten by a tick and you knew you were hiking or in your backyard where they, if you get treated quickly, then it can be really easily treated and you can be fine. It's just that mine went on for so many years and it really destroys the immune system and lots of all the good stuff in the body.
Wow. So 7 years after you'd started having symptoms, you're finally given a diagnosis.
Right.
And so you were already getting some treatment at the time.
Right.
So what happened from that when your journey kind of started in a new direction?
So I had been treated for all kinds of different diseases prior to my Lyme diagnosis. They thought I had lupus. I was on all kinds of different treatment programs. So anyway, I started on heavy-duty antibiotic therapy, which is one of the treatments for Lyme disease. So there's lots of different protocols, but that was just one of them and the one that I went through. And I did that for almost a year, and I just was still so sick.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, and I mean, I now hear of people who are treated for 3 to 5 years on antibiotics, and intuitively what I felt was that my body was just so deteriorated from going untreated for so long that's where most of my symptoms were coming from. I had just debilitating pain in my whole body. I didn't have strength in my legs and arms. I had some lesions on my brain that showed, scarring. I had all kinds of things that intuitively I just had to feel like it wasn't the bacteria anymore. It wasn't an active disease.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started looking into other options.
Okay, and that's what led you to the embryonic stem cell therapy.
Yeah.
So how did you stumble upon that? And
life helped me stumble.
That's
how it goes.
Yeah.
So what happened was, by the time I learned about this at the end of 2007, I was at a writers' conference in Maui, and I was well enough to sort of get there, not go to all the presentations that I wanted, but get there, and I did antibiotic injections in my hotel room by myself in between classes, and I actually met somebody who had just gotten back from India and was treated for a spinal cord injury with stem cells. And we started chatting, and she said, oh, the doctor in India knows a lot about Lyme disease. And I thought, how is that possible? Half the doctors I met here didn't know. So I started to research, and I talked to the doctor in India, and she said, well, the stem cells have the potential to really repair your immune system and repair all your nerve damage. I had so much nerve damage, and I had bone marrow biopsies that showed abnormalities. Nothing was quite right after those 7 years. So anyway, so I thought, well, nothing's working here, and I was still really didn't have a full life. And so I decided to go against my doctor's wishes and everybody else's, except my family was very supportive, and I got on a plane and went to India.
Wow. You were going to read us a little bit of an excerpt from your book about your Indian adventure.
So a lot of people ask, how was India? And I say, the treatment was amazing, and it did help improve my immune system a lot, and I came home a lot better off than when I went. But I think that the culture and being in a different world and all the adventure that I went on while I was there was part of my healing journey. And so I thought I would just read an excerpt.
We'd love that.
That's kind of a fun one.
Okay.
So part of my journey was really going out and exploring the city, and a lot of patients didn't do that so much. They were there to heal, and they weren't going
That's
outside.
it, yeah.
And for me, I was crazy when I was locked in the hospital for too long. So I write, venturing off to explore a new part of town is always something to write home about, literally. Sometimes when you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, you need to get away from it all. Luckily, Delhi just happens to be one giant distraction, making it a perfect remedy. There is no way not to be enthralled, entertained, saddened, hopeful, and inspired, and all that can happen just in the tuk-tuk ride to your destination. The outdoor market we go to looks from afar like a crowd full of Crayola-colored jumping beans. People busily shop, children hustle beaded necklaces draped from their arms, men sell unidentifiable roasted food from big tin bins, and women decked out in jewelry look me up and down smiling, probably pitying my plainness. The vendors, or shall I say pushers, call me into their stalls to offer things I'd never even want if they were free. As annoying as it is, I have to admit I'm entertained when one man insists I need a flute. Do I look musical? Several people all lined up attempt to sell me the same product, identical wooden toy snakes that are popular. Another man tries with all his might to convince me I should get an embroidered shirt in the wrong size that looks like it's designed for a grandma. I kindly say, no thank you, what feels like 400 times. After he brings the price down to almost nothing, I tell him, no thank you again, and explain it's just not my style. He is confused and asks me why I don't like it, as if he will be able to resolve the problem on the spot and make a sale. A woman and her baby follow us for blocks and blocks asking for money. There is a joke here that for every one you give to, 1,000 more will appear. And although an exaggeration, it feels close to the truth when you see it. If you need a visual analogy, think the popular Verizon commercial where the network is coming down from trees, lowering themselves off of buildings, and appearing from every angle to surround the subject. Picture that many people all telling you at once they need food for their baby, mother, brother, dog, or whatever excuse they have rehearsed. They must have a secret code for, hey, come quick, because we've got a foreign sucker on our hands. My dad, with his obnoxiously huge professional camera strung around his neck, is a walking target. So that's just a little bit of the fun. Every time we would go out, and my parents went with me for the first 6 weeks, and then I stayed the rest of the time by myself because I was well enough to do so. Every time we went out, it was like, we were celebrities because we were this white family, you know, in not a touristy area of the city. So I was once followed around a zoo because a group of boys thought I was Shakira. They were convinced I was Shakira. At that time I had really, really big curly hair, and they just kept following me, and I kept saying, I'm not, and they were just like so suspicious.
So cute. And
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you read that excerpt because it really gives us a glimpse into this book being very juicy and very vibrant and written in such a way that it really holds our attention. And we want to see the story unfolding because you made it really, really personal. And you took this book from the journalings that you did at the time.
Yeah.
And I know that you mentioned that as you wrote it and put it all together, you were able to put your perspective as you are now in there. But it's such an interesting story. It's not a medically laden story that's dry and it just kind of tells about your treatments, but you tell about your life.
Right, and in fact, it was really hard for me to put the medical stuff in there. Even when I wrote the sort of before India chapters, it was really hard because I'm not one to focus on physical symptoms. So I gave enough background, but it's definitely just a book about life and about healing and about following your heart.
And it's a wonderful inspiration because there's so many of us that do have something within us that our body is trying to give us a message that something's not well.
Yeah.
But we often do go through this. There's so many people that have gone through the same type of thing that you have where you go from doctor to doctor to doctor and you're not quite given anything that's useful in terms of healing. And we tend to give our power away to medical professionals.
Right.
And what you are really telling us is that our bodies own the power, that we do have the power to heal. So tell us a little bit about how you shifted from kind of giving your power away or searching for answers to more of a mode of self-healing. When did it really dawn on you that your body really could heal itself?
So it didn't really dawn on me until I got home from India, and actually several years after I got home from India. So the treatment really, really helped, and I have to give fair credit to the treatment because it did really save my life in many ways, actually. But the doctor in India would always tell me, the stem cells can do their work, but you have to do yours. And I would always roll my eyes because I would think, what more can I do? I've been in pain for so many years. And I always had a hard time with the Eastern philosophy there. And the physicians were always like, you have to do your part. And I didn't quite get what I wasn't doing. So anyway, I left India. A few years later, I started having strange symptoms again. And I didn't get really sick, but I just had some things come back where it was like, oh, this doesn't quite feel right. And I started thinking about what the doctor in India said to me, that I could heal myself and I had to do my part. And I started really, really looking at the mind-body connection and our bodies as more than just physical beings, but as energy beings, and how energy flows in our body. And I had been to acupuncture before, so I understood how important it is for us to smooth out those blockages and get everything flowing. And I really started to look at how I was participating, because I thought, wow, I've had several different health issues in my life, and I'm the only common denominator here. There's a problem. And so I looked really at the way I was living my life, how I tended to go towards fear when situations, could present themselves in that way. And how maybe I was in relationships that were more draining than positive. And, just a lot of the ways that I lived my life and how hard on myself I was, and all those things, and how they can really affect the immune system and the body, and how they can create those energy blocks in your energy system. And so I started doing a lot of research, and I started working with my own energy system and getting some support from an acupuncturist and doing all of those kinds of things, but also really trying to see what could I do in between appointments and what could I do for myself. And that's when I really, really started to heal and have been symptom-free for many, many years now.
Awesome.
And really got healthier than I ever was before I had Lyme disease. And before I had Lyme disease, I had endometriosis, which is a menstrual condition that's very painful and that they think causes some autoimmune issues in the body. And even those things are resolved now. So stem cells couldn't fix my uterus, but apparently I could.
That's right.
So
that's amazing. So you really saw the connection. You started doing some of these things for yourself where you really could see that you had to be in 100% for yourself.
Right, and I think some people aren't able or don't want to look at the part of themselves that are contributing to an illness. But when we look at it in a different light, when we think if we're contributing to it, then we're part of the solution. It really frees us to look at ourselves in a gentle way, not to blame ourselves at all, but just to say, what could I be doing that's stressing my immune system, or that's blocking my energy, or doing all those things. And so I just looked at my life and I started to learn some techniques that would help my energy flow and help me learn to be less stressed and hang on to things. I was one of those people that if you said something that hurt my feelings 4 years later, I still remembered exactly what you said. And I could still feel it when I remembered you saying it. And those things all just wear down a body, even reborn after stem cell therapy. And so you can't go on living your life in the same way and expecting something to change. And I think when you go to the doctor and when you keep searching externally, the doctors can keep putting Band-Aids on things and they can keep helping you kill the bacteria, but what will actually strengthen you to the core?
There you go. I love that. So tell us now, is that why when you started doing some of these energy techniques, some new practices, new lifestyle, new way of looking at your body, and a new way of looking at healing, then obviously that led into you wanting to help others in the same way?
I just thought I couldn't know all this and not help other people like me who didn't know it for 8 years, and suffered so much. And I see that there was so much that I could have done that would have helped all of my treatments work so much better. And that's what I think the key is. It's not using only one thing to try to cure you. It's just helping your body along to accept whatever you've decided as your medical treatment plan.
And it's always very personal.
And it's whatever people feel comfortable with. A lot of my clients ask, would this work alone? And I say, it could, but I mean, definitely don't abandon your other practices, but it can only help everything else really work better. And I think a lot of the blocks that we have to work on ourselves really stop or prevent the medical treatments from working how they could.
So tell us a little bit about those. Tell us a little bit about how you work today and
Okay.
what you do with clients to help them in their lives and their own healing, because it sounds like you're talking about can also be emotional blocks that stop us from healing.
Right, and that's what I primarily work with, because I tried to treat my body for so long, and it wasn't until I really treated the emotional and energetic aspect of my body that things started to move and move in a positive direction.
Yeah.
So that's what I help people do. There's two things. I help them look at maybe what's keeping them from getting well. Are there any subconscious fears about not being safe if they're well, or having too much responsibility? And these are all the same things I really couldn't listen to when somebody else suggested them to me, but here I am on the other side going, oh, I guess they did me, I guess they were right. So, and again, not to bring in the blame,
Sure.
because a lot of these are subconscious. They're things that our body, our subconscious minds are doing to protect us,
Yeah.
And it's very hard for us to get to those by ourselves. So that's what I help people do, is kind of look and see what's the downside of getting better. And if you're really honest with yourself, whether you have issues like you worry all the time or you have multiple sclerosis, there's always a downside of getting better. You just have to be open enough to be able to see it. So working on releasing some of that, and then also I feel like stored emotional baggage from the past that we just can't get rid of really, really has an impact on the immune system.
Is there a way to release that?
So I use several different techniques. A lot of it is tapping on acupuncture points, a technique called emotional freedom technique, or EFT, that I teach people to do at home. I use another technique called the emotion code, which actually uses magnets and magnetic energy to pull that emotional baggage out of the body. So we're not just talking about, and I'm not a therapist, I'm not a licensed healthcare practitioner in that way, we're just talking about releasing some of that energy that gets stuck in the body, the things you feel as your heart racing or a pit in your stomach that sometimes talking about just doesn't release.
Yeah, so you go deeper then in helping us to release some of that stuff.
Exactly, just relax the body so the immune system can work.
And how do you work with people, in person or distance, or how can you work?
I do everything. I do everything.
You do it all.
So yeah, and I've purposely set up my practice to make sure that nobody needs to be dependent on me, because
Right.
I was so frustrated when I had to wait for a doctor to call me back 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, when he had time when I didn't feel good. And so I really do, my phone work is teaching people where to tap on themselves and how to release this energy on themselves. And then in person just gives a little extra comfort to some people, and many people don't.
So empowering. Empowering.
Thank
That's
you.
the word I think of when I think about you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Well, I know that there's going to be people that are going to want to know where they can get your book, This is How I Saved My Life. Where can we get the book?
So Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And on your website, which is Amy B. Scher, SCHER.com. And if they want to work with you, same?
Yep, you can just contact me
Through the website.
Yeah.
And give us your phone number for people who do not have access to the internet.
So my phone number is 805-236-8079.
And your website again?
www.amybscher.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and just being so bold and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Reaching out to help so many people like you do, because it doesn't matter where you are, you can work with Amy.
Thank
you, Amy, so much. I really, really appreciate you being here. And thank you.